Roxo Media House.
Frog fans, welcome into the first episode of Facing the Frogs. I am Jamie Plunkett. He is Coach David Beaudin, and every week we are going to take a look at TCU's upcoming opponent on both sides of the ball to get a better idea of what they're going to challenge the Horned Frogs with every week. This week, though, Coach, we've got FCS opponent Tarleton State, the Texans, coming from Stephenville. Coach, tell me a little bit about before we get into film. You know, every year we have this debate, it feels like, with fans, not just at TCU, but all across the country. What's the merit of playing an FCS opponent? Is there anything of value that TCU can glean from playing an opponent that is, for lack of a better word, just not on the same playing level?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think anytime you're playing football, I don't care if it's versus air, okay, you've got to make sure that you've heard it all week, especially now. It's been pronounced, a lot and magnified this week, but they've been trying to say it all season, starting in camp, is it's all about us, right? We got to worry about us, and there's a lot of things you can gain from it. Just your operation, your communication, sense of urgency, your tempo. All of those things can be, practiced and honed. It's no different. You're going against practice every single day. And this is no slight to. I think we'll talk. We're going to get into some clips here and show that they're certainly a formidable opponent, but. In practice, you're doing the same thing against scout team, right? Why practice? To say like, well, the competition's not the same. It's the same thing. It's focus on you and really your team operation. You got to pay close attention to that, regardless of who you line up against.
And looking at this Tarleton team specifically too, they've got a couple bodies, especially on the offensive side of the ball, that can really make some things happen. We saw that as we kind of went through their film against Mississippi Valley State, the first game that they played. But, head coach Todd Whitten got a big transfer in at quarterback, the former Kentucky player Bo Allen, who's from Lexington, Kentucky. It was pretty strange that he came down to Texas to play football. But when you looked at film right out of the gate, what did you see from Bo Allen? Yeah,
big, strong arm guy that he's not a statue back there, right? I mean, at first I thought, okay, maybe, dropping level because he's got the arm strength. That's on display right out the gate for them in this first game. And I thought, okay, maybe he's just a guy that stands around, but it's not. He can move around fairly well and get himself out of some jams, and then he can do a lot with his arm and kind of throw off platform. So, a lot of things, he didn't have to have a solid base, but he's not one of those guys that are a full body thrower. He's a guy that can, again, have people draped on him and still get it out with some zip. So he's impressive. He's a quality quarterback, and that'll certainly present a challenge.
And he's got some big bodies to throw to as well. He's got Jaden Smith and Gabe Douglas, guys that combined for over 200 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns in their first week win. Tell me a little bit about what you've seen from those guys.
Yeah, I mean, they've got some real length, especially on the outside at receiver, which, I don't care who you are, again, or what your jersey says, that presents a challenge for any DB, right? It's not, they have one, receiver that you said is 6'6", right? Who can go up and get it.
Jaden Smith, yeah.
Yes, yeah. And so you're not going to find anywhere in the country that has corners that can match that, right? So that presents a challenge because you can't leave guys on an island all game. Because that's so now all of a sudden you have to do some things in coverage, which you're going to get into a little bit, to put guys over the top in those situations. And so it removes guys from the box or safeties running the alley because they have to worry about those outside threats.
So let's get into the film then and take a look at these guys and see exactly what TCU is going to be challenged with on Saturday.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I thought we look at the first drive right out the gate, right? Because we want to find out who are these guys, and nothing more telling than looking at the first drive of the season. This is what they've been working on, all camp. So give us a great idea. So right out the gate, they go to false cadence. So you can see the quarterback clap there and no one move. And the only reason they snap this thing at that point is because the defensive end up top jumps off sides. They're going to get a free play. If you look at the 2 receivers up top, so up here, I think the call for them, and everyone has a little bit different system when defensive players jump off sides. I've been part of a place where it's an automatic sprint out, right? You've got a certain flood concept built in. A lot of times kind of the old school mentality is just go, everyone go deep. I think here you see the 2 guys running hitches up top. So these 2 guys will run hitches here. Let me get this off of here. And so they'll run hitches up top here because they've got some space. Down bottom, I believe that's the call as well, although he converts it. So it looks like he's just got a vertical route on that's called. More likely the case is it's a hitch that converts to a fade because he's got a corner in his face.
Gotcha.
And you really don't want to run, a hitch route versus a press corner.
Okay.
But you right out the gate, you'll see them go after it, and you'll see that length on display. I don't come up with it here, but they do have a safety up top. But again, it's a free play. They end up at 1st and 5. One thing I wanted to note, we'll look at the end zone film here real quick. A little unique in protection. This is something that I think TCU can really attack. If you look here, standard protection, it's a 4-man rush from Mississippi Valley State here in this case. And so typically what you want to do for protection is this. He would set, the right tackle would set here, the right guard would set here. These two would double with their eyes on this linebacker. Okay, right here. So they would double to that linebacker if he came on a blitz.
Sure.
Okay, this tackle takes this one. The back, who they keep in protection, so it's a 6-man protection, is responsible for this linebacker right here.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that's standard protection versus this defense when they're in a 6-man protection. Okay, all that said, so we're going to get rid of that here. We'll watch Tarleton State here. Watch the right tackle, 74. He sets inside. Okay, what that does is it puts their tight end on the defensive end one-on-one. That's not really a situation you want to be in. You can use a tight end to chip. You can use a tight end for extra protection. You can use it in a 7-man protection. But when you got a 4-man rush and a 6-man protection, you really don't want your tight end. It looks like, in this guy here in particular, is a converted fullback type. Especially against the quality, defensive ends and defensive linemen that TCU has. That's something. If that's who they're going to be, they can certainly attack.
So when you're talking about TCU, obviously they have the odd stack, they have the odd front, they've got 3-3. So when you're talking about guys like Dylan Horton and Terrell Cooper on the end, how is Tarleton State going to prepare to block those guys?
Yeah, so that's a great question. But I think one of the things I would do is at least they've got to set this tackle here. Okay, and then they can help with the tight end on those guys. That's how you can do it. I mean, essentially creating a double team, during a pass rush. In defense of Tarleton on this one, though, and again, without knowing, being in their heads here, with the free play, I have a feeling that another call was on, and then it just went automatic, and this right tackle, not panicked, but he just sort of was out of sorts a little bit, and that's why he set inside.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because if this is something that they show consistently on film, in the past years and all that stuff, that's something that TCU will certainly take advantage of.
Awesome. And obviously they don't get the completion here down on the right side. That's Gabe Douglas that they targeted. He's 6'3", and he's the shorter of the two outside receivers that Tarleton has. But it looks like, they still took the 5 yards and moved on here. So let's move on to the next play then and just see, now that they're 1st and 5, what are they operating out of right here?
Sure. This is a tight bunch formation. Okay, so the first 2 plays so far, we've seen 11 personnel. So 11 personnel is 1 back, 1 tight end. In fact, they stay in 11 personnel the entire drive, this entire first drive. So, again, we're trying to identify who is this team. They're 11 personnel team, right? Okay. First drive of the season, they stay in it the entire time. We can expect 11 personnel for the majority of the game. Okay, yeah. They come in at a tight bunch set. This is made really popular. Frog fans will remember Matt Rule was the head coach at Baylor. Before Aranda and going way back when he was the offensive coordinator at Temple under Al Golden. And Al Golden, now he's actually the Notre Dame defensive coordinator. And we can just keep going down that rabbit hole. But when Matt Rule was the offensive coordinator before he became the head coach at Temple, they made a living out of this. And really there's a lot of stuff you can do in the run and pass game out of this set. And you can use these guys on reverse. And again, we haven't seen this from Tarleton yet. But these are things that a lot of split zone and that sort of thing. So for these guys here, they're in 4 down right now. This is Mississippi Valley State. And so we'll take a look here out of this tight bunch set.
Looks like he gets tackled by his own man there.
Yeah, and so one of the things that's interesting that I want to point out is that they run a power play here. And what that is, Jamie, is that right guard is going to pull. So, this makes a lot of sense. This is a 4 down for Mississippi Valley State. Like I said, this guy's inside leverage. So it's called the 4-eye technique on this left tackle here, okay? Mm-hmm. Most teams, and I'm sorry I got this line here.
You can just hit undo.
Yeah. Most teams will send somebody back, okay, to here. All right, to block. it won't be the guard. He's pulling, but the center will work back. They'll find a way to get some help here. Okay. I think this is important to note because we'll let this thing play here in this power play. When he pulls, Tarleton's right tackle tries to get inside, right? He's out leveraged from the beginning. And again, I want everyone to take a look.
It's 74 here, right?
I believe it's 54 right here.
Oh, left tackle.
Yep. We want to take a look there. Yep, left tackle. I apologize. So he tries to scoot inside. Now, that's nice, and no disrespect, again, to Mississippi Valley State. They're able to get away with that. But with the personnel that TCU has, this is something, if they're going to continue to do this on power, that they're going to exploit. There's no doubt. They've already got leverage. They've got more talent. And what happens is you just take that tackle and walk them back into the gap and blow this whole thing up.
So we're talking about tackles here, but, we saw Dominic Williams as a 17-year-old move mountains against Colorado. He's going to have a field day against this offensive line too, don't you think?
Yeah, I think they're going to have a lot of success. And the thing it's one thing just to play straight up. It's another thing to be out leveraged and have more talent, right?
Sure.
And so, again, if this is how Tarleton's are going to run power, then they're going to have a heck of a day up front. You're right. You're exactly right.
And this isn't an offensive line that's inexperienced for Tarleton State either. They're returning 4 of the 5 starters from a season ago where they only allowed 13 sacks. And their right guard, I believe, is the only newcomer, and he's a transfer from Louisiana Monroe. So there's a lot of experience, a lot of senior leadership along this offensive line. So there's definitely some potential there to allow this offense to get their plays off and move down the field. But what we've seen, at least in these first 2 plays, is that they're being challenged a little bit by Mississippi Valley State. And so, if you think about the talent that TCU has on their defensive line that we've seen through at least 1 week, there's definitely some potential there for some chaos.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also, I want to just note that 41, the tight end, he's got guys on the ground a couple plays in a row here. We'll see. But
right here in the middle.
Yeah, but he's got some holds. I mean, he's grabbing a lot of jersey.
Yeah.
He's slinging guys. And so that's someone I think, just from his defense, he's sort of playing out of position a little bit, a little undersized. And so that's something that they can definitely attack since they're 11 personnel team like we talked about, right? Or I think they can get after 41 a little bit because of that. But you can just take the wide look here at that tight bunch set and then running power.
And 74 does his best after he collides with the running back to help at least move him forward a little bit.
Absolutely.
All right, so what's up next here?
So we've got we're down on 3rd down. I think this is 3rd and 1 here. We'll start in the wide. So if we take a look, what they're doing here is this is straight play action. Okay, everyone now, if you put on TV, Jamie, right? Every Saturday and Sunday, you hear everyone now that they show the ball and they throw it down the field, it's an RPO, right? A run pass option. This is not a run call at all. And I think one of the keys for TCU is they can kind of go old school a little bit from their safety play in terms of reading keys.
Okay.
The RPO game and the way things have evolved over the last 10 years, you've sort of got away from that because
Sure.
You're getting false keys, right? You get a lineman showing low hat and they're actually throwing the ball and all this. I think one of the things to keep an eye on here, just look at the line of scrimmage, and we're going to have another one on this drive as well, but just sort of watch them pop up, right? They're and the safeties are reading that high hat. As soon as they see their hat pop up in the air, then they know it's passed. So they don't have to pay too much attention to the play action in the backfield.
Obviously, he has a lot of time. We were just talking about the offensive line. They do a good job of creating a relatively clean pocket for Bo Allen on this play, and he has time to throw it down the field to Gabe Douglas.
For sure. And with that 11 personnel, this is a formation that Tarleton really likes. It's twins pro. And so up here, you have twins to the offensive left. And then down here, a pro set with a tight end on the ground, with his hand on the ground, and then a receiver off the ball to that side. So twins on this side, pro on this side. They really like that a lot as a base formation. It's a balanced formation with the tight end. I think we're going to see a lot with 41 in there, but not solo him up as much, right, against Mississippi Valley State. They want to use him more for help. He has a real huge hold here. I mean, we'll see that in the end zone. We'll go back and take a look real quick. But you can see 41, again, what I was talking about earlier, just sort of being undermatched a little bit. And you'll see his hands get outside his pads.
He just bear hugs him and pulls him to the ground. And this was not flagged, though, in the game.
No, it was not. Nor was the push-off here by the receiver. So they might have got away with 2 there. Tarleton did, but hey, it's all going to equal out in the end.
Yeah, take what you can get.
That's right. But if you look at 41 again, this is another passing situation where they're putting him sold up, right, by himself on the defensive end, and it's sort of unfair to ask, a tight end to block a defensive end, on pass plays.
It feels like, at least the first 3 plays, and to kind of pull back big picture here, this is the first offensive series for Tarleton for the whole season.
Right.
So we know that this is the as the main focus of the offense. This is what they've scripted. This is what they've worked on the most throughout fall camp. And every single play so far, their right tackle, 74, has blocked in. He's blocked. Is that blocking down? Blocked in. Towards the guard. Versus paying any kind of attention to the defensive end whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. It's odd in pass pro. I've just got to be honest with you. And so I don't know. To me, it looks like they're all kind of sliding this thing, a gap to their left. So it's kind of an old school sort of elementary protection. But it might have just been a game plan thing for them. That's what TCU needs to figure out.
I mean, it looks like it was the plan, because 41 doesn't even hesitate before he wraps up the end. So he obviously knew that was his assignment.
You're exactly right. Yeah. Okay. And so once again, you see the big arm on display here from the quarterback, the long receiver that can use his body to shield the defender and give him room on the sideline. Receivers do a really good job for Tarleton to not, get pinned to the sideline. Right? They use their body and allow the quarterback to have some space to throw that, down the field. Watch it one more time before we go on to the next play. But they're not getting pinned to the sideline. See how he's trying to work back to the numbers on the bottom of the screen
using
here?
his body as a wall.
That's exactly right. Yep, that's exactly right. So he's using that, and that's the advantage of having long receivers like that with big bodies. They're able to shield those DBs. So again, definitely a thing to keep an eye on. And one more thing to point out of note here, defensively, is with that play action, you can see the quarterback does a really good job burning his eyes through the safety. Okay, and what I mean by that is the quarterback always wants to burn his eyes through the defender that he's trying to influence.
Okay,
all right, and so because he needs to influence him, it doesn't really matter right here so much of the linebackers. He's not going to get involved here. But what they're doing is they're trying to run this stuff, get the ball down the field, and create one-on-ones with their receiver.
Okay,
and by influencing him, this safety running up, that doesn't allow him, like it did on that first play of the drive, to get over the top here, right? So I think that's a big deal. It's something to pay attention to. In safeties, again, how can they avoid that, Jamie? Is by going back to read their keys and reading that high hat. Okay, when they watch all the offensive linemen pop up, well, now I don't have to pay so much attention
to that run.
That's exactly right.
So, and this is a good question for you then, at least I think it's a good question. Gillespie talks a lot about how he tries to simplify the game, especially for his linebackers and his safeties to an extent as well. He wants them to make their read and then attack. He wants it to be almost instinctive. So when they've worked all fall camp on reading those keys and identifying false keys and being able to do that in a split second and then move, how does that change, or does it change when you're going against a more traditional style offense where there's not as many false keys and you're really just getting what you get?
Yeah, I think that I actually think it helps them, right? Because now you can just say, look, just go back to just read your keys, right?
Okay.
You're not going to get fooled much here with this offense. They're good, they're talented, they're well coached. But at the end of the day, just do your job by reading your keys,
Okay.
and so you've got to have great eye discipline on defense.
Yeah.
And because it looks like in all their drop back pass game, at least in this first game, a lot of it is just incorporating some kind of play action so they can take advantage of defenses that don't have great eye discipline.
Yeah.
And so again, it just goes back to them reading their keys.
Okay. So let's move on to the next play then, because Tarleton's marching down the field here. They've hit Gabe Douglas now for a long pass. He had 11 catches for 126 yards at the end of this game, which was team high in both categories for Tarleton in week one. But do you see them go back to the ground game here after they have that big completion? What do you see here?
Yeah, so they run a counter play, traditional counter play, which is pulling the guard and tackle, right? Not so much counter backfield action, but in terms of the blocking scheme. And so what they're trying to do is the right guard is trying to kick the defensive end. You see he gets a little piece of him, and then the tackle is going to wrap up inside for the linebacker. The reason 41 is arcing here, so if we can put our eyes once again on our man here at tight end, he's this time playing off the ball, He's playing 1-by-1, sort of an H-back position. He's going to go ahead and arc out of there. What that is supposed to do, and it's not so successful here, but that's supposed to widen this defensive end.
Yeah.
So now when this guard comes and kicks, he goes to kick, and he's looking to work inside, downhill, inside the line of scrimmage. Then it widens this guy and it makes it easier for the kick. Okay. Now, one thing, and again, I know we're not breaking down Mississippi Valley State here, but this is one thing that TCU does really well that you don't see here on film. You can handle this thing two ways. I'm going to go to the wide to really get a better look at it. And I want to, key down here at this defensive end, okay? And this is something that TCU will work on, certainly because they're so far Tarleton has been a gap run scheme play, okay, which is opposed to zone. So that means a lot of down blocks, a lot of pullers, so down and kick or down and around, that kind of stuff, all right? So they're gap run scheme play. Well, you can handle that one or two ways at defensive end. You can be a box team, so you can take it on with your inside shoulder and force the ball back inside.
Gotcha.
Okay? Or you can be a spill team. And if you're a spill team, what you're trying to do is create a car crash in here. You want to go inside here and blow it up. So now everything bounces outside to your help. So that whether that's a linebacker over the top, if they had an overhang here, or if you've got a safety running the alley, you're trying to bounce that thing.
Yeah.
Again, this isn't pick on Mississippi Valley, but they do neither of those things.
Okay.
So to be honest with you, and so what happens is the defensive end just runs up the field.
Gotcha.
And, when you hear teams say or announcers talk about, hey, defensive ends just pinning their ears back, right? Because you can do that in pass rush. But that really hurts you versus a gap run team because of this. So he runs up the field. He just essentially took himself out of the play.
He just runs right past him.
That's exactly right, yeah. And so, I imagine once they get better at this, Tarleton that is, if a team does that, then they'll just have two guys turn up, and be leaders. But we'll get a good look at the running back here. And Jamie, I know they talked about it today. Coach Gillespie did about their three running backs, right? And he had said that his words were there's not a nickel difference between all three of them. All three are scat backs, talented guys, right?
He did, and he also mentioned too about TCU wanting to be a spill team, like you were talking about, forcing guys out on the edge onto the perimeter where their safeties and their speed can really make an impact. We saw that a little bit against Colorado, and based on the conversation with Coach Gillespie during his press conference today, that's obviously what their game plan is going to be against this three-headed running machine of Tarleton State as well.
Sure. And last thing I want to put on this play is just this is an option. So if we're looking at Tarleton State, they have all this run game, and then this slot receiver here is just running what they call a float bubble. So he's just floating back, and eventually, if this linebacker here starts working his way closer and closer inside the box to add a hat to the box, then they're gonna no change, no check. They're gonna have the same run call on, and they're just gonna flip it out to the slot receiver out here who's got tons of room.
So Bo Allen just has that in the back of his head. He's kind of watching that outside linebacker to say, if he drops in, I've got a guy right here in the slot that I can sling it to.
That's right, yeah. And he can do that one or two ways, Jamie. He can either throw it now, meaning he can tell the running back, whatever their call is, whether it's a me call or he gives them a tap. That means the back's just gonna cross his face right now. He's gonna catch it and rip it to him.
Yeah.
That's if the linebacker pre-snap is inside.
Gotcha.
Okay. If it's post-snap and he sees that he triggers inside, then he can just flash the ball, let the running back clear, and then throw it. So there's one or two ways to get there. But I just wanted to point that out because it's something that, certainly that they can't add that extra hat to the box because of that threat outside.
Makes sense. Awesome. So this is obviously a big running play down to the 5-6 yard line for Tarleton State as well. And then they kind of close out this possession by going back through the air.
Yeah. So again,
just kidding. They run it first one more time.
Well, from here, I don't think we have a wide copy of this play.
We don't, unfortunate.
But again, you'll see this is the first time they've shown any kind of non-gap run. So this is a stretch run to the side. The back is taking sort of what they call a level one path. Okay, and what that means is he's going flat across the quarterback's face, and so it's the linebackers now. And Jamie, you mentioned this earlier about, hey, they're just a react, right? They don't want to think a lot. Well, when they see level one from the back, they can just start
getting after it.
That's right. They can run and start wave running, getting over the top of all that stuff because they got full flow, level one. Let's go. Let's not hang around. And that's a nice thing about not having to think too much in this defense. they can go make plays, and they certainly have the speed to stop stuff like this.
So tell me, on the offensive line, what's the expectation here? Because it looks like 71 doesn't quite get around his block like he should, and that kind of slows this play down a little bit.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the 71 here, and I'll go ahead and just this guy right here, we're talking about the left guard, okay? I want to take a look at him. He really needs to do a better job working his backside hand through the defender, right? So in this case, his right hand working through the defender, and then 54 should give a little presence there. He should punch a little bit to make it a little easier. But you can see, again, if we're looking at Tarleton State and who they are, there's two types of mentalities in the run game. It's either put a hat on a hat, which it looks like that's what they want to do, or teams that want to double team the point of attack. Right? You can't really do both. There's just not enough numbers for that. But they want to look like 54 here goes immediately out, and they just want to kind of put a hat on a hat and cover it up and let their really good running backs try and make a play.
Right on. All right, so this is the final play of the series, I do believe, and we're going to see them go back to the air here. Yeah,
we get a nice look at this receiver who's listed at 6'6". He makes a one-handed catch. Those are one of those plays where the cornerback comes off the field and you pat him on the head and say,
look, he's frustrated. You can tell 23's trying to get the incompletion call, but 7 here does a really good job of getting up and getting back down with one of his feet inbounds to put Tarleton up early.
Yeah, for sure. And again, you're not trying to influence. Even though linebackers are running up here on this play, just with that ball fake from the quarterback, you're really just trying to influence safety so they can't play over the top. And again, it just creates one-on-one. Mm-hmm. So, after that drive, Jamie, you look at who they are, all right, and who they open the season. They certainly want to run the football, a lot of gap run scheme, and then they want to make sure they influence safeties so they can throw the ball to their big, tall receivers down the field, right? And so those are things that I believe that the TCU defense will be watching all week and preparing for.
So when you think about that, then the 11 personnel, 6'6" and 6'3", outside wide, gap running, who are some guys on TCU's defense that have the opportunity to have a big Saturday?
Yeah, well, I think, Josh Newton comes to mind, a guy who is listed at 6'1", is that right? So, certainly for a corner in the world of cornerbacks, a taller guy for that, right? You want to make sure you match up. At the end of the day, it's all about, football has become a matchup game. And so that's all Tarleton's trying to do is match up their six guys or, tall receivers on smaller guys, right? And you want to match speed versus people who can't match speed and all those things. So I think Josh Newton certainly could be a guy to take a look at. The linebackers, because of the way this defense is run, I think, D. Winters can have a heck of a day. I do believe the defensive line is going to take care of business. I just think they're too talented, and they'll play things, as we talked about, a lot differently, in my opinion, a lot more sound than we saw from Mississippi Valley State.
So let's shift then to the other side, to the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, Tyrone Nix is the defensive coordinator at Tarleton. He's been around for a long time, so long, in fact, that his defense now is considered more of a traditional defense that's not seen a ton anymore. He runs more of a base 3-4 defense. Tell me what you know about his defense and kind of what have you seen on film so far?
Yeah, he can be extremely multiple. He'll move guys around. They'll have different fronts. But you're right, he bases out of a traditional 3-4. Okay, so let's just take a look at what difference, because it's both an odd defense, a nose guard defense, and that's what TCU is, right? TCU is an odd defense as well, 3-man front, but it's a 3-3 stack. And so the difference between those two things is obviously you see the 3 down linemen here across the board. We're going to talk about how their technique's a little bit different when we get to the end zone, but there's your 3 down linemen, your 2 overhangs. So there's 1 here, your 2 outside linebackers, and then you're balanced up at linebacker. So normally that's playing that over a 30, they call it. So it's outside shoulder of the guard, give or take, depending on what the defensive line technique is on both sides. So pretty balanced. And then because you can do that, it's a 7-man box. And then now you can play it out of a 2-high arrangement. So you can either play cover 2, you can play quarters, you can play a combination of those things, but it's a 2-high arrangement. The difference is in a 3-3-5, which you see, 3-5-3, you see a lot more out of a 1-high arrangement, right? Okay. Because you got now. You would, again, I'll go ahead and look at from the end zone in a second, but you'd have 3 linebackers stacked inside. You'd still have the 2 overhangs, so that only leaves you 1 safety left for the middle of the field.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right, so just the presentation and your coverage, how you present that, as a base now, right? They can still get in these different looks. We'll do those things. The other thing is you'll see a lot of rotation from their safeties, and we'll get into that a little bit on film. But that's kind of what you'll see from them. Lastly, in terms of their base defense, if there's a tight end to this side, let me go back to the end zone here. If they've got a tight end, in which this case they do, this is the first play on defense, then this outside linebacker will usually play closer to the line of scrimmage. Okay. If you go to the wide, you'll see this outside linebacker playing off the ball because he's got a receiver inside here. Okay. So tighter to the formation, you'll see this guy walk down closer, all right, and almost create a 4-man front. And if he's off the ball, so that's just kind of their base. I don't want to say a check, but that's their base alignment for that. Now, last thing of note in terms of their base defense, this is a traditional 3-4 with one exception that I found. A lot of times those 3 down linemen in a 3-4 will play what they call a 5 technique, which is outside shade of the tackle. Okay, these guys here will play their defensive line. I know this is tough to see here, but they're playing inside shade of the tackle. They're playing a 4-eye technique. Okay, what that does, and this is really where I think TCU will be honed in on, is we saw a lot of zone stuff against Colorado, right? In the run game for TCU. Well, I think that's a really tough thing to do versus these 4 eyes, and here's why. What happens is if you're running zone away, so let's just say hypothetically they're working this way, okay, it's really tough, as we talked earlier, to make that block against a guy that's you're out leveraged on, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to have to run some gap schemes, TCU is, versus these guys like this, where you block here and then you pull a guy around, those kind of things, versus those 4 eyes. So it does present some unique challenges that a traditional 3-4 doesn't, by just adding that technique. There's some other things that hurt them, but
and we saw too from TCU's offensive line against Colorado, there were a couple of moments where, especially on the right side of the offensive line, there were some issues with who was getting who, assignment issues, I guess, and we also saw at one point, I think it was Steve Avila got called for a false start when he was very clearly going to pull, and so there's definitely some things for the TCU offensive line to work out. But as far as leverage is concerned, do you feel like TCU has the advantage there simply because of the seniority of Steve and especially Brandon Coleman on the left side of the line there?
Yeah, for sure, I do. I think these are things that that they'll study, they'll have down, and their communication has been so great during camp.
Yeah,
I think that's really going to propel them in games like this where they, if they come out in a different front, and Tarleton's been known to kind of throw a lot at you, they'll be able to communicate that stuff and get it fixed. Right. So I think that's big. Let's take a look at this just real quick, though. And we will, because this is something in protection that TCU is going to have to at least be aware of. This weak side outside linebacker to this side, so top of the screen, right here. Let's start with him. For Tarleton. So that weak side linebacker becomes their default 4th rusher. Okay. So when they don't have a blitz dialed up, generally that'll be the guy that is their 4th rush player more often than not. Okay. They can do some other things and drop him and stuff, but he'll probably come anywhere from, in this defense, 65, 70% of the time as the 4th rusher if they want to bring a 4th guy. Okay. What they're doing here is they end up bringing 4, and this is something to keep an eye on. Is I want to take a look at this linebacker, this strong side inside linebacker here, if we could, and just watch the delay blitz from him. So let this thing run, and you see him blitz. Now, it doesn't impact this play here necessarily, but what that does is once he sees what they're doing is they're playing sort of a man-free concept, okay? And if we can go back, okay, that means that it's man underneath, okay? You can see him playing man there. I'm sorry, he's got man on the tight end. And then these 2 guys, you can do a lot with the extra guy because you're only bringing 4. Okay, you've got to cover, all right, 5 guys. All right, so you have an extra guy to do something with.
Sure.
Right, I'm not a math guy, but I can tell you I know that much, I think. And so what they decided to do is you can either blitz him, you can play him as a whole player, you can spy him with the quarterback, or you can delay blitz him. So Tarleton has done this a bunch, and it's something to really keep an eye on during the game because once they see the back comes out, and then now this linebacker takes him because the back came to his side. I imagine if the back would have come to the other side, then this linebacker would have delayed blitz. why that's such a big deal, and if you can get there a little bit faster, it can cause some problems because all your assignments are down the offensive line. You've got all your assignments accounted for, and all of a sudden this guy blitzes late. Mm-hmm. If you're holding on to the football, if you're Max Duggan this week, you've got to be aware of that extra guy and make sure he gets accounted for.
And it looks too like here, at least on this play, they have a linebacker on a slot receiver, or I guess on the tight end coming out of the way here. They've got the other linebacker, outside linebacker, blitzing already, running back on this linebacker here. But tell me, looking at this and seeing a linebacker covering a tight end, TCU has two linebackers in Draquarius Spivey and Jared Wiley who are very big and very athletic. Is that something that you think the Frogs could take advantage of?
No doubt. It's a great point. There's no question. So if you want to play man underneath coverage and not put an extra defensive back on the field, you're exactly right. You're going to end up with a linebacker on a tight end or a linebacker sometimes on a slot receiver.
Darius Davis lined up on a linebacker?
Right. And so, if they can try and create those matchups, then they can absolutely take advantage of that. I completely agree. This is the third play of the drive for the defense and something to look at because, Jamie, we saw a lot last week of that speed sweep, right? Mm-hmm. The jet sweep play. They ran to three different receivers, if I'm not mistaken. And so this is just how this defense reacts. And I have a good feeling that if they see this on film consistently or they see it in the game, that they're going to have something schemed up for it. Okay, when they send this receiver in motion, automatically check, what they call rock and roll the safeties. Okay, so that means is to the motion side, he's going to rotate down, and then his responsibility is to rotate deep to the middle of the field.
Okay, center fielder, yeah.
Yes, sir, that's exactly right. And so as soon as they let this thing run, what that does, now this linebacker scoots inside because he has no threat. So he scoots inside. All right, if you're trying to attack places on the field, if you just take a look, if he scoots inside, he's in the middle of the field, he's rocking down, you've got all this grass to defend right here. So you just think about, doing something here where they fake it to him, they throw a slant to this guy. You have all kinds of stuff. You can come back with a screen this way. So you just got to be something that I would keep an eye on Saturday night to say, hey, look, if they're treating this the same way, which, TCU's put it on film. They've put on that jet sweep play and had success with it. If this is their answer, well, I wouldn't be surprised to see TCU come back and attack this area.
Well, we did see that speed sweep a few times from TCU. Darius Davis, Quentin Johnston, Savion Williams all had significant gains on that exact same play. But we also saw TCU run a reverse for a touchdown. And so is that another thing that could maybe counter this defense if they're overcorrecting this quickly, but, in pre-snap before the ball's even out?
Absolutely. And I can tell you the one thing I picked up from Coach Garrett Riley, as the offensive coordinator for TCU, is that he's not afraid of success. Mm-hmm. Okay, and a lot of coaches, I can tell you that growing up as coming through as an offensive coordinator, I was guilty of this. And it's all of a sudden you start overthinking things, right? I don't want to do this because they know that I know, one of those deals,
sure,
right?
Yeah.
Well, Coach Riley's shown that if something works, go ahead and do it. And they'll certainly have a reverse as a football play, not as a gadget play. Mm-hmm. But you're right, just if something that, that's exactly right. If they're rotating out of there and this guy's leaving, if they can get back to a reverse, I'm sure they will. So whether it's a screen, a reverse, a slant backside, it's just something to keep an eye on. I think that they could attack.
Okay, so before we move on to the next play, because I do want to keep going on defense here just a little bit, we've heard from Coach Dykes and Coach Riley this week already about how they want to get Quentin Johnston more involved earlier in the game. He only had 3 catches for like 49 yards against Colorado. He did have 6 targets, but only 3 catches. Based on the defense that we've seen so far here, what's an opportunity, or is there an opportunity for TCU to get QJ involved a little bit earlier in the game?
Yeah, I think this is one of them, right? So if the slot goes in motion and you're doing that and you fake and they rock and roll the receivers, now again you've got Quentin Johnston down bottom here, one-on-one with a bunch of space. That sounds appealing to me, right? Anytime you can do that, so that's certainly one way. And I think do some other things where it's a little bit tougher. When they're playing that too high coverage that we saw, because they can double team things, but that opens up things in the run game. But when they go man free, there's some things there you can do. You can what the defensive guys call run a pick route. The offensive guys call run a rub route, right? Because the rub part's not illegal.
I think defensive guys also call that pass interference, right?
Yeah, that's right. So they can do some things there too underneath. To sort of get him involved, and so there's a lot you can do, and they run a lot of mesh concepts.
Okay.
TCU does, and where they're running crossing routes that are close by each other, and that works really well versus man-free covers that we talked about a little earlier.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and take a look at one more defensive play, and then we'll kind of wrap this thing up.
So we'll go ahead and look at the wide here.
So we see another linebacker, though. This is another instance where a linebacker is on a tight end, and he gets around the edge here and gets free for a big gain.
I'll tell you what's interesting, and I saw a lot of man no blitz out of Tarleton State, which is not all that common. Again, they do some funky things. You can see a defender here, again coming late. But again, it's just a 4-man rush. It's not necessarily a blitz, right? They may it's what they call a simulated pressure. Okay. So it makes it look like it's a blitz, but at the end of the day, it's still a 4-man rush, right? So and they're still playing man a lot of times, following guys around. So you're right. You're going to end up with some linebackers in coverage when you do that on some guys that they're a little bit outmatched. So because with the 4-man rush, obviously you can give a lot of time for that quarterback. So that's something to definitely take a look at, where they can once again create those matchups that they want that are advantageous for the Frogs.
Awesome. This has been really enlightening, Coach. I really do appreciate it. Again, folks, this is going to be a new weekly series that we do every week of the football season, is kind of giving you a preview of what you can expect from TCU's opponent on any given Saturday. I am Jamie Plunkett. This is Coach David Beaudin. We'll be back next week for episode 2 of Facing the Frogs. But until then, go Frogs.
Enjoyed it.
Good stuff, man.
Roxo Media House.